A gavel.
Yeah.
We are live. There was an old NFL pregame. We are coming to you live.
Oh,
That's how I start, that's how I start MSN. You're looking
And
live.
good morning. Thursday, May 8th, 2025. Our first witness is going to give us an update on vehicle sales ending through another month close. So we're going to see what was sold in April and year to date and information on what's happening out in the marketplace. Obviously, we have interest in that from our purchase and use tax and also all of our EV goals and mandates and climate initiatives. So good morning, Mr. Cota. Welcome to the chair. I know you have a presentation for us. Well, welcome back to the chair.
Thank you very
Let
much.
us know what is going on out in the automotive dealer industry in vehicle sales.
Matt Cota with Meadow Hill for the record, with Vermont Vehicle and Automotive Distributors Association. Cameron, should I Zoom or should I plug in?
It should be right into your email, because in the
I apologize.
5 seconds.
That's okay. While we're doing that, we're going to, for the committee, we're going to try to, after this piece, we're going to try to finish what is in the S1, 23 as it stands right now, prior to amendments that I know are out there. We're going to try to, we have 4 sections left, and we're going to try to get to that. And then we're going to come back to it and try to, we got a couple of walkthroughs, and then we're going to look at what we might add to the bill. But we have 3 or 4 sections that are still outstanding that we haven't checked off. There's some movement on those. And then we'll go to all the amendments that people want to, if they want to present. So that's our public service announcement, and we're back to.
Thank you for inviting me back, Chair Walker, members of the House Transportation Committee. As I said, my name is Matt Cota with Meadow Hill on behalf of the Vermont Vehicle and Automotive Distributors Association. Meadow Hill Media on behalf of VEDA puts together a vehicle index every month, publishes it on our website, and provides information for policymakers and for car dealers on what's happening in the marketplace. If you see my enthusiasm, it's because I really enjoy talking about it, because it's the intersection of things that I really care about, which is energy, the environment, climate policy, the economic policy, how we pay for our roads and bridges. But don't mistake that enthusiasm for being hopeful on the numbers that we've seen for the first 4 months, because as you see, as I'll walk through it, it will impact both our commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector and the ability for us to collect funds to pay for our roads. You may have seen these headlines everywhere from Automotive News, Detroit Free Press to CNBC, talking about the surge in sales. The surge in sales primarily because of federal tariff policy. There's still some uncertainty there, but certainly we have seen marketers, dealers, manufacturers advertise, get your pre-tariff cars now that are already here, that cannot be tariffed because they're already in port. And so in many parts of the country, in fact, nationally, we have seen nearly an 8% increase in new car sales in the month of April. These are vehicles that were in the States, whether they were produced here or produced overseas or assembled here, but parts came overseas that do not have tariffs attached to it. So consumers reacted and they bought more vehicles. That did not happen in Vermont to the point. And that, of course, affects the dealers that I represent and their profits, and also the money that's collected through the purchase and use tax, which funds both transportation and education funds. But if you look at the numbers, the top 10, these are the first 4 months of 2025. These are vehicles registered in Vermont. They may or may not have been purchased within the contiguous boundaries of Vermont, but they have a green plate on them. They're registered in Vermont no matter where they were purchased. Most of them were purchased in Vermont, but not all. And you see the numbers of the vehicles, new vehicles. How it stands when you compare to the first 4 months of last year, well, we're down 13%. But if you dig in a little bit deeper to new car registrations in Vermont through the first 4 months of 2025, as compared to the first 4 months of 2024, the anomaly is January. So January of 2024 was we were up a little bit in February, down a little bit in March, up a little bit in April, but January was a banner year, as was December of 2024, as was November 2024, as was October. And speaking with my colleagues, I think the reason is we had a tremendous amount of inventory and a push from the manufacturers to sell in those months, and that is, the dynamic has changed a bit. So our sales are down compared to they were with Q4 2024.
That makes sense why there would have been a surge, I guess. And is that true not just for Vermont, but for the rest of the nation, that those months were better than usual?
Yeah, the difference being, I sat in this chair a month ago and said, I expect April sales to be vastly better in Vermont than they were in March. And I was 30% true. They weren't as good as we had hoped. They were better, but nowhere near, as you can see, catching up to where we were through the first 4 months of 2024. Again, because January was so strong in 2024 and it was fairly weak in 2025. So have they been moved to the, I'm sorry.
Oh, he's got another, he was looking at that chart. right
That
there.
it's because 2024 was abnormal, that maybe this year isn't necessarily down. It's just, is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, that's fair. And for all I know, that the things will happen in the marketplace that I can't predict that will change that curve and will continue some more. I'm just gonna tell you what we've sold the first 4 months and make some assumptions about what the next 8 are gonna be like. But it's not.
White's got a question too.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Can you just remind us what were the factors contributing to January 2024 sales being so high? Were there incentives? I mean, obviously, like, the political situation was, it wasn't we weren't changing administrations. There were probably EV incentives nationally and statewide, then other things that were contributing to high sales.
Yeah, so I can only speculate here, although I would say
Or, January,
4 every 5 cars it has a gas engine. So it's not, or 4.5 out of every 5 cars has a combustion engine. So it's not related to incentives in my mind. It's related to production. I mean, we remember during COVID, when we looked at empty car lots, when used car prices were going up, the supply chain caught up with it. This is just speculation, but I suspect when the supply chain caught up and there was this inventory and then incentives, no matter what the powertrain was, to sell them. And then that may have evened out, to Representative Pouch's point, which is perhaps this is just back to normal. I do have the numbers and I can show you that, but you might think that maybe the used car market would pick up. In fact, the used car market performed worse than the new car market. Here's your top 10 used vehicle by make registered in Vermont, January through April. Down 21%. These are used vehicles registered new to you in Vermont. So these aren't re-registrations of my old car, registering it again. This is, I bought a car and it's new to me and I'm registering for the first time in Montpelier and putting a green plate on it. Those are down 21% when you look at where we were through the first 4 months of last year. And April was pretty even, but all 3 months prior show a decline in registration of used vehicles for owners for the first time. The top 10 going on to electric, battery electric, and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. These are not hybrids that have a gas engine and electric battery, but that's it. These have plugs. Either plug in that the entire powertrain is electric, or it's a combination of gas and electric. And here are your top 10 battery electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles through the first 4 months of 2025.
Oh, never mind. I was like looking for Tesla on the last ones, but now I see Tesla there. It just seems like while I'm driving, I see them all over. I don't know if it's because they catch my eye, because you immediately recognize them. But I was going to say, where's Tesla? But I obviously didn't look. It's not there.
That's the 4th most popular make through the first 4 months of 2025.
Representative Burt?
Yeah, do you know what the breakdown is of the plug-ins versus the all-electric?
I do. I have that. I don't have that in chart. I think it's in a graph that's coming. I'm happy to supply that with you for a breakdown.
Great.
Yeah, that's very observant, Representative Burt, because Toyota sells a greater number of plug-in hybrid electric vehicles than they do battery electric, versus Tesla, which sells only battery electric vehicles. So it does change by manufacturer, certainly. When you look at new and used battery electric vehicles, just battery electric vehicles, we're about even where we were this time last year for new, but down substantially with used. when you look at new vehicle registrations by fuel type, here's where, from a climate policy, I think is instructive, which is the small pie chart is 2024. It shows your plug-in hybrid electric vehicles at 4%, your battery electric vehicles at 8%. Through the first 4 months of 2025, battery electric vehicles have held steady, still at 8%. Plug-in hybrid electric vehicles down a point, gasoline the same. So in terms of we are selling about the same amount of plug-in and battery electric vehicles through the first 4 months as we did in 2024. But of course, facing us all is this chart. And where we have to be with model year 2026, which are being assembled now, will be delivered to vehicle lots starting in July throughout the next 12 to 18 months. And that's 35%. So if you look at the chart, these are the numbers that I get through our tool, which is Experian Auto Count. And it shows you the different fuel types, and you can track it by month and how much. And I know you can't really read that, but I'm happy to provide the spreadsheet that does that. You can see that from a battery electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, we are still hovering around 12%. I had predicted 14% by the end of the year based on growth that we've had. I revised that to say that's 12.5%. I don't think we're going to get to 14% by the end of the year. I think we'll get to 12.5%, but absent something happening outside of the borders of Vermont, we're on track to get to 12.5% battery electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, which is a problem when you consider that the ACC2 requires 35% of the vehicles delivered to Vermont to be battery electric or plug-in hybrid vehicles.
Representative Burton.
You think that some of that might be because of the lack of incentives?
I think there's a whole basket of reasons why we are not able to get, we may not be able to get above 12.5% by the end of the year. Certainly incentives help, but they're not the only reason why people, there's a whole host of reasons. I'm happy to dive into that, but the bigger, more immediate problem is trucks. So the advanced clean truck rule is, on the battery electric, if the inventory does not arrive here of the gas vehicles, you can still go to New Hampshire and buy a gas vehicle there and bring it over here and register. Not so on trucks. On trucks, model year 2026, we're at 10%, class 2, B through 3. So where we're at with this is we have, as testified by Secretary Moore, we only have 32 battery electric class 2B through class 8 trucks. Most of those are transit vans or school buses or GMT vehicles. There's a handful of class 8 trucks, but not really. To meet our climate goals, I am on the Climate Council as a fuel sector representative. We need to get to about 9,200 by the end of the decade. Just the universe of these trucks. Remember, we have 500,000 registered light duty vehicles in Vermont. We only have 26,000 class 3 through class 8 vehicles, but these are tools and most of them are diesel, and there is no diesel equivalent yet that comes in a battery. And because the rules are written the way they are, you cannot, because you must register them. The manufacturer only gets credit if the purchaser of that class 3 through class 8 vehicle registers it in Vermont. You can't just simply go off to Lebanon and buy a class 8 tractor trailer truck, which is a problem.
What about, so we're going to sell, do you know how many trucks we sold in Vermont in the first, or registered in Vermont, any of these class that were registered in 2025?
So unfortunately, the Experian tool doesn't break out. It only focuses on light duty vehicles because that's their business model. That's what we pay for. I can tell you that 6,000 in 2024, 6,000 new class 3 through class 8 vehicles were purchased and registered in Vermont in 2024.
I'm sorry, how many?
6,000, roughly 6,000.
There are 26,000 registered.
There's 26,000 total class 3 through class 8. So I'm not counting your Ford F-150s, your Toyota Tacomas. I am counting your Chevy Silverado 2500s, your Ford F-350s, which make up in transit vans and delivery vans. But when you get to the class 8, as you can see you can see the little graphic, the buses are class 7, but the concrete trucks, the tractor trailer trucks, the fuel trucks, the trucks that fix the electric lines, those are all class 8. So if I could summarize, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you want, our sales are down compared to the rest of the nation. Our sales didn't surge in April as we had hoped. We have tariffs, which frankly, depending on the make, not only the make, but the model. Remember, some foreign-owned automakers assemble their vehicles in the United States, but they only assemble certain models. Some American companies assemble their vehicles in Canada and Mexico. So it's hard for me to say how the tariffs will impact each manufacturer. I can't even tell you how they'll affect each model. I can't even tell you if they'll be in place tomorrow because I don't know how this is all working out. But, according to the smart people that study this, tariffs could add between $2,000 and $12,000 to a vehicle when and if they take effect and if they're sustained. We have been selling pre-tariff vehicles in April. Those pre-tariff vehicles will eventually evaporate. And if you bring in a vehicle from overseas or parts from overseas, it will have an impact on the price you pay on your car, which is why we thought April sales would be more impressive in Vermont than they were, or at least match nationally. They did not.
The EV sales, EV and S, the chart you had at 25 versus 24, they were basically dead even, right? One more, I think it's 25.
Yeah, actually,
I basically showed the graph that said 2024 and 2025 through April were dead even almost. So the incentives had gone away, but we're still sold to most for January through. You kind of flipped through there. Whoops. No, you went through that one spot.
I'll pull it back up there. Share. So so if you look at, to Representative Burke's question, where are we tracking compared to on EV sales? Here's your EV line, battery electric line. You can track, where we started from through 2024, and you can see this big push, or this maybe Representative White's question, big push September, we're over 400, October, November, 315, December down a little bit, February up. March was a very bad year or very bad month for EV sales, but it was bad for all sales. We'd love to get to a point where we're selling 400, 450, 500 EVs a month, but we're not there yet. And we need to get to 600, 650 for this ACC to work.
And you're saying that basically so far through 4 months, they're flat to 2024. That was the one chart I thought I said that, the other one.
Yeah, they're flat. The first 4 months, EV sales in Vermont,
Are the same.
2025 to 25, they're flat. PHEVs have gone down. Here's the challenge with PHEVs. They're less popular than hybrids. If you look at, stop my share and go to the chart. Gas electric hybrids, no plug, but pretty good mileage, are much more popular than plug-in electric. That's just 3%. Problem with plug-in electric hybrids is you still have the two different powertrains. You have the electric motor and you have the gas motor. And it's caught in between with these regulations. Battery electric vehicles, you get full credit if you sell it under ACC2, the Advanced Clean Car, the California rule. Plug-in hybrid vehicles, you only get 10% of the credit, and it has to meet a certain mile per gallon. So a certain manufacturer might sell plug-in electric vehicles, but the combined miles per gallon is less than 30. Doesn't count. You don't even get partial credit for that. So from a manufacturer's perspective, you could see the incentives to comply with ACC2 to focus more on battery electric rather than plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And then you get no credit for selling you could sell a hybrid vehicle that gets 45 miles per gallon. It gets zero credit, the same zero credit as a gas guzzling truck would get. Does that make sense from a climate perspective? I don't think so, but that's the policy we've adopted.
So
Maybe it's not part of your presentation, but like from now to the end of the year, with, I guess there's 10% tariffs on car parts and cars. Any, what's your industry thinking?
So the National Organization of Auto Dealers, the National Auto Dealers Association, like it's very sort of public, they put out quite a few statements, but to summarize, tariffs will have a impact on the market, which would be very negative, particularly to the small dealers, of which we have many, and their inability to absorb the rising costs. So certain manufacturers will experience tariffs different than others, but it's not as simple as saying, well, this is an American company, so they'll be fine, and this is a foreign company. Nissan, clearly a Japanese company, very popular car, very popular electric vehicle, assembled in some of the models assembled in Mississippi, areas of the South. So certain manufacturers that are clearly foreign-owned companies are assembling here, and certain American companies are assembling in Canada and Mexico. So it's not as simple and as clean as, and I'm not a tariff policy expert. I can just say that it's a challenging time, no matter who your manufacturer is, to figure out how those price impacts of tariffs will impact the vehicles that you purchase, then pay interest on when they're on your lot and hope to sell to your customers. Add to the fact, I know some people are sick of me saying this, add to the fact of the tariffs, which are not the result of anything that's done in the state of Vermont, as you all know, but the electric vehicle, the California rules are. So add that complication, and for a car dealer to now try to figure out how they're going to adjust their floor plan, which is basically how you stock your shelves. If you're a retailer, you have to pick out what you think your customers are going to buy, but you add tariffs plus these California mandates, and this is a very challenging time for Vermont's auto dealers.
Representative Burke.
I was just gonna say, just reading how, by contrast, what's happening in China is they're hardly producing any gas-powered cars, and a decent starter model costs $10,000. I mean, and they have some government subsidy and also other advantages, but it's just interesting that they figured out how to transition
Well,
to electric, and sort of saying, yeah, the US used to be like ahead of everything, and now we have a very myopic view of what government should be for, and it's like we're gonna lose out on that count.
We're gonna make sure that we're staying with our questions in the direction. but
Sorry,
we also-
well, I think we're talking about, cars that people are buying, and, you can buy a car for $1,000 and a luxury car for 50, then, we're not in that ballpark. I don't know how we get there, but.
We'll see where we go. Representative Keiser, you're next.
Thank you very much. So the information you're presenting is basically the same trends that you saw the last time you were here?
Yes, the caveat is I had hoped, I may have said out loud on the record on YouTube, that I expected April numbers to surge because of the tariffs and the knowledge that you can, and the advertising, quite frankly, that get the pre-tariff vehicles. We did see sales go up in April, but not what they saw nationally. And maybe that's because Vermonters didn't have the means to buy a new gas vehicle or diesel vehicle or hybrid vehicle or electric vehicle, or maybe it's for other reasons. But
So then basically these trends that we've had over the last 18 months, don't they tell us that we're not going to get to the mandates that are prescribed under the car and the truck EV rules?
yeah, that's the yawn right there. That's the gap. And it gets wider and wider every year that we adopt it. And the challenge with the ACC2 rules, Representative Keiser, is we either choose the federal rules or we choose California rules. We can't choose our own level. But we're not even gonna get halfway there. I'd hope that we'd get to 15% battery electric vehicles at the end of 2025. We'll be lucky to get to 13%, and that's still a far cry from 35%.
Sure. So what's the repercussions if these standards aren't met?
Repercussions are manufacturers could tell Vermont's locally owned franchise auto dealers that we are going to meet the mandates by sending you less gas-powered vehicles. We are a blip on their balance sheet, the number of cars. We sell 35,000 new cars a year. So for them, in order to comply with Vermont's regulation, they could simply send us less gasoline-powered vehicles. That's called lowering our allocation. In which case, there'll be fewer choices for Vermonters on Vermont lots, all the choices they want on New Hampshire lots. They could send vehicles that customers don't want to buy or don't want to buy in those numbers. So if a dealer says, I only want 12.5% or 13% battery electric because I'm following the market, they could say, sorry, your rule says 35, we're sending these other cars. And you take on that risk as a local dealer. A large dealer, as any large business, can absorb that type of capital risk more than a small dealer, a single store owner, as in any business, whether you're selling bread or fuel or cars. So that's going to be a challenge for our smaller dealers to comply with. Or the manufacturers are allowed to buy credits from manufacturers that overproduce, mainly Tesla and Rivian, but that credit market is pretty much sold out, and some of them just refuse to send another check to Elon Musk. I don't blame them. And then the fourth way they could do it is simply comply by paying a fee that is pretty vague right now what it could be. The California rule says up to $20,000 per vehicle under the mandate. Obviously, $20,000 is a non-starter. They'd rather send us less or not send at all. What that number actually ends up sugaring out to, really important to those of us that sell cars. So we either need this, we're asking for a delay because there's so much uncertainty on how this is going to affect our customers and our dealers, and the importance to transportation fund, person use tax, climate and energy policy. It really has a lot of people up tonight.
One last question, thank you. So what are the reports from the field regarding what the dealers of cars and trucks are doing for their staff? How are they adjusting their business plans?
This is thank you for the question, Keezer. This is the uncertainty about both tariffs and the EV mandates, which is if they are received fewer allocation of vehicles, they certainly need less salespeople in order to move those vehicles. If you're used to getting 100 vehicles and now you're only going to get 50 because of the rule, you probably need about half the sales.
So you're going to see a cut in overall staff, a reduction in employment, a reduction in taxes paid. And so this is a real wall that we seem to be running into.
That is what the fear is. No one wants that to be the result.
Right.
This doesn't help anyone. So we're trying to figure out how to navigate that.
So this rule seems to have a direct effect on people's immediate life and their ability to pay their bills.
Certainly.
Well, we're coming up close on our 10 o'clock for our next spot. For those of you that were not here at the beginning of the presentation, I want to make sure I got at least this part right. The country saw a surge in sales of vehicles in April, primarily on this. The Vermont did not.
Yeah.
And that, I'm just saying, summary of what I think I took out of what you were saying. And new and used cars, both in Vermont, were down in 2025 versus 2024. Also noting that January of 2024 was a banner, unbelievable year. So it's hard not to be down. But overall, new and used sales are down. The country saw a surge in sales. We did not. We saw a slight rise in sales in April. EV sales are any combination of electric vehicle involvement is flat in 2025 over 2024 for the first 4 months.
That's correct.
And the tariff issue is an unknown still and affects manufacturers in a lot of different ways. That's what we heard so far this morning. And we're up against our time. Representative Wells was next, and then Representative White. We're gonna run over to the next one.
Okay, I'll be brief.
Stay on the sales.
Something that's forgotten all the time. with the 15% goal of selling these electric cars. These iconic American dealers and American buyers want style, they want horsepower, they want design. Those Chinese boxes built by communists, Americans don't want them. And so they're not going to sell here. And the 85% majority that still buys these vehicles doesn't seem to be heard at times.
I'm not sure if that was a question.
I didn't hear it. I didn't hear
I
it.
would say though that
Representative White, you have a question?
Which he's not laughing.
I have three questions, and if you need to answer afterwards, it's fine. Okay, number one, have Vermont dealers had to pay penalties or had to buy credits for Vermont being part of the California standards thus far?
Can I answer that one right now?
Pardon me?
Do you want to ask, can I answer that one right away?
Yeah.
No, because only manufacturers so in the way that America is set up, manufacturers cannot own franchises. That's the franchise law. So franchises do not own the car manufacturer. So under the California rule, the manufacturers that are obligated to either deliver the vehicles as required by the regulation or to pay the fees. It wouldn't be the dealers. It would be passed on to the dealers.
Manufacturers are paying the fees, not the dealers.
But the fees wouldn't happen until after model year. This is where there's often a disagreement. The fees, or the accounting doesn't happen until after the model year sales are through. So when advocates of this policy point out, there isn't going to be any accounting for this until for another 18 months. So what's the hurry to bring this to our attention now? And the reason is because, yes, they are correct. There won't be any money exchanging hands until then. But these decisions to build these very expensive vehicles are made very proactive. It's even worse. It's even when you think about a truck. If you want to order a new fuel truck or a new truck for Green Mountain Power to fix the power lines or a new concrete truck, you are putting the order in now and you hope to get it in 18 months. So the reaction from the regulatory agency, which is you're not even going to pay, the manufacturers aren't going to pay these fees until 18 months from today. And the response from the people that purchase these vehicles to resell is we have to make these decisions 18 months in advance. And that's the disconnect between the regulated community that really hopes that this regulation will work and the business community in which we don't wait 18 months to figure out what the cost analysis of. We have to decide 18 months prior.
Second question, do you have data looking at all the states that are following the California regulations, including Vermont, versus the rest of the country in terms of vehicle sales up or down?
Yeah, I don't have it on me, but I can get that to you.
I'd love to see that. And then lastly, what would help drive sales of electric vehicles in Vermont?
The availability of affordable vehicles that consumers want. I mean, that's the basic one. And the infrastructure for those that don't have access to level 2 charging at night.
Thank you. Great. You finished?
Okay. Well, our legislative council actually is another 3 or 4 minutes away. So when I thought we were going to run behind, it wasn't my fault. We were running behind, which is such a rarity. So unless there was another spot or question, though, we can. I'll just. Well, there you go. It's got to be a question, but Representative Casey.
Okay. When I just bought a truck there, I don't know, three weeks ago or so. And I was asking the dealer, I says, how's your electric car sales going? And they said that they were selling their cars to other dealers, passing them on, other dealers were taking them. So I don't know what that means or whatever, but I mean, somebody can sell them somewhere in the state apparently, but.
Yeah, certainly there are areas of Vermont that perform better no matter what the manufacturer is. Depend on the customer's ability to or interest in an electric vehicle. And quite frankly, I mean, you've heard this from Mark Alderman, probably one of the highest performing electric vehicle sellers in the state, Mark Alderman from Alderman GM in Rutland. And he's very honest with people when he says, when you have a garage and a level 2 charger and a place where you park when you go to your office that has charging as well, why would you ever go back to gas? But that is a minority of Vermonters. Not all Vermonters have a job where they park their car for 8 hours while they work. Not all Vermonters have a dedicated 20 by 10 spot outside their house with a charger within reach that they can plug their car in overnight. Those that do and can afford to buy new, they like electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are not going away. But the majority of Vermonters that don't have those two luxuries, dedicated parking spot with a level 2 charger, job where they can park it and charge it overnight. And yes, you can have public infrastructure and you can charge at the gas station. You might be able to charge out on State Street and other places. But that is not the same economic or efficiency or comfort, or doesn't fit the lifestyle of individuals who are buying these vehicles. The story of the single mom in Rutland who bought the electric vehicle, or at least electric vehicle, because it was the best deal on the lot, but ended up, at night with her kids in a car, putting a kilowatt in and losing a kilowatt out because she had to keep the heat on. Like, paying more than she would for gasoline because it was a for-profit charger, not at her home. Like, these are the challenges when you try to sell a vehicle. It's not, is there another $500 you can get from an incentive? It's, do you have a charger? Do you have the ability to install a charger at your home? What is your work schedule that allows you to park the car and charge it so you can drive it safely home? What is your commute? It's not just, is it 200 miles versus 250 miles? It's more about where you live and where you work. And we're always going to have gas, unfortunately, for people who think that we're going to move to all electric very soon. We're always going to have diesel. We're just going to have ever increasing numbers of electric vehicle powertrains and slightly decreasing numbers of gas and diesel power powertrains. But it's not going to be a switch that we flip that allows everyone to go electric all at once, because our lives aren't built that way.
Last one, if it's a question.
I'm going to put a question mark on the end of it. Okay, so obviously these EVs aren't hitting their goals. They lack design, a lot of things I won't get into. They're on the ropes, from what I can see. Hydrogen vehicles are 5 years away. Will that machine just KO them and finish them off?
I'm going to say no to you, Representative Wells. I'm going to say electric vehicles will continue to increase at an incremental pace, far slower than what the regulation requires, far slower than what my friends who join me on the Climate Council say is necessary. However, electric vehicles will increase slowly over the next 20 years. I do believe that. The reason why we don't have cheap BYD Chinese vehicles, because President Biden and then President Trump put in a tariff to protect our industry that has union jobs, well-paying union jobs that assemble trucks and cars, and not the stuff that gets built overseas in China. That's why President Biden put a tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. For good reason, protect our industry.
Yep.
Hydrogen, the problem with hydrogen is not the technology, it's getting the hydrogen stations to the vehicles. Hydrogen is wonderful. There is no exhaust. It's water vapor. The problem with hydrogen is creating the hydrogen. And if you're creating the green hydrogen, meaning you're using renewable electricity to create hydrogen, that's wonderful. If you're using a diesel generator to create hydrogen or coal, we're not really solving the climate problem, but we are creating a tremendous expense in infrastructure. That said, I absolutely think hydrogen, especially in the heavy duty market, in replacing diesel, will be bigger. But I also think biodiesel for these heavy duty trucks will play a more important role in the next 20 years. So I think it will be a mix of different powertrains and different fuel types. It won't be electric or combustion, and that's it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
And
More French fries.
We will, if we're, heaven forbid, if we're still here at this time when next month numbers come out.
I love you all.
I'd love to have you, but you gotta leave.
There is a slight adjustment to this next section under going to the, back to the S-123, our miscellaneous motor vehicles. The agenda does say 15, 16, and 43. I forgot to make sure that 11 was included in that. And that's where we're going to start when our alleged counsel joins us in the chair. When he gets his chance, we're going to go back to, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections that were open. 5, 4, 5, 18 is also open. I'm sorry. So we got 18 as well. Cameron, we're going to try to work on. The goal is to get through the bill if we can. I'm not sure that we can or not, but as it came over, and then hear another amendment. Well, we have to pause over back to conference committee on the T-bill, and then we'll come back and hear about an amendment that is being proposed for the bill, and then we will decide what of the amendments after all of them are in what we are or aren't going to. We got to get to at least, if we can, we got to get to what is in the bill that came up from the Senate, whether we agree with it or not, and whether we're at that pot. So, Lynch Council, good morning, and thanks for joining us. If we can start on S-123 and section 11 is open, as far as the order goes, and whether we've made progress with the judiciary and the other attorneys and where we are in section 11.
I had 11 marked as everything.
And
I
had it still
checked my.
I had it still as open. I thought that you said you had to go back to, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I am. Go ahead, check.
So we have gone back and we're good on it.
You said
So-
it was open, I guess, or not open, but it
It
is.
was open. So the section 11 relates to masking of commercial in relation to individuals with commercial driver's license or commercial learner's permit, CDL, CLP. Basically, the language that we're looking at to line us up with the DUI bill is adding in, and I'll pull it up here if I can get into the meeting. Oops. Cam, can you send me the link, please?
The calendar that back.
I don't have a calendar invite right now.
Did we hear from DMV?
So this is actually DMV's proposed language.
Way back in the beginning,
Um,
there was an issue.
Yeah.
We went to, what happened with 11 was proposed, we got the review. I took the sections over to House Judiciary, and they were working on another bill that had an aspect of a definition on a couple pieces, back and forth, and then this part related to masking anyway. So it went back and forth between judiciary attorneys, our attorney, and making sure that it was there. I apologize if there was a spot where it probably was picked off, but I do know they were still working on this language as it related. I don't want to go too far because I wasn't involved in the discussions other than knowing that you were still working on it.
all right. So let me share my screen. Okay. All right, good. Okay, so this, basically what we're doing here is the federal law allows, requires that you cannot mask through deferred imposition of a sentence or something like that. A traffic violation for someone who has a CDL or a CLP, or who is operating a commercial vehicle without one of those, except if it is a parking violation, a vehicle weight violation, or a vehicle defect violation. Our prior law just said parking violation. In the DUI bill, they are updating that language in relation to the Judicial Bureau to say that they cannot defer the sentence for a parking violation, vehicle weight violation, or vehicle defect violation. And what we're doing here is just mirroring that language so that the statutes line up. So the highlighted language there, this was language that was proposed in the DUI bill by DMV's counsel and is incorporated into that bill, and we're matching it up here so we don't have a difference between the two statutes. So, sound good?
We have it all set and lined up.
Yeah.
We're all good with that. I assume there's a thumbs up as I look around. So I guess you had it already checked off, but I guess I concur that then
All right.
as council concurs that it is all set.
Yeah.
So then we can move on to 15, 16. We did check off 17, 18.
Okay. So 15 and 16.
15, 16, 18. All kind of work together. I think.
Okay, so 15 and 16, there are a couple of different things going on here. The first is there's DMV proposed language with the early renewals. So 15 and 16 are the provisions that allow you to renew a license or a non-driver ID early. And so DMV's proposal here is to say that rather than saying the holder of an operator's license or privilege card or a non-driver ID for section 16 may renew the license at any time prior to the expiration, to say on not more than one occasion. And then this language would have a sunset within the next year or two. So I think the original proposal from DMV is a 1-year sunset. So otherwise, this language, as came over from the Senate, is permanent language that allows you to do an early renewal at any time for a prorated cost. DMV's proposal is on not more than one occasion. I know the committee's also seen alternative language from Representative Tomlinson that is not in this draft. So
It is on the agenda for 11:30.
Yep. So, and that's it for those two. Oh, and then the DMV proposal is the prospective repeal for 1 year from now. So,
Representative Thomas?
Thanks. Just to clarify, it says once in your lifetime, basically.
essentially with the 1 year sunset on these sections, it would be one time in the next year. So, and that could be, if you took away the sunset, you could say not more than once every 4 years or something like that. You could certainly, I'll adjust that language, but given the 1 year sunset, the not more than one occasion worked with that.
Okay. And what's the effective date for these sections?
It would be, currently it's July 1 of this year. It could be changed to on passage. I know that's been discussed. I don't know if that can be implemented by the DMV or if they need time to get their staff up to speed and ready to go on this. I would defer to them on that.
Couch, or
Yeah,
you want
so
that way first or go this way first?
and maybe I wasn't paying attention. So this says, the way it's written is you'll have one time to do this early renewal. It won't be a policy going forward.
That's essentially what this would do. It would put this in the statute for 1 year. You'd be able to use this one time within that year.
And although, you know, I think we have some ideas on why it might be used, we also talked about, like, my daughter's gonna go overseas for a year or more. And so, you know, she doesn't want her license being renewed. So this, if it's only one time, you wouldn't be able to do this
Right.
in the future. And okay, I that's new to me. I
Okay.
hadn't picked up on that.
Maybe I want to make sure that I'm a little bit more. What you're saying, the with the yellow, is it the without the yellow is what the Senate came over with.
Yep.
The yellow is what the DMV is proposing. So we do have two
Versions.
There is
Yeah.
two things going on here, so I guess.
Yeah, so the Senate version
I didn't.
And I'm sorry, this
Version
was.
Did not have that. The DMV is saying we would like. Well, we probably let them speak for themselves. The DMV.
So, and I apologize if this wasn't something you wanted in here today. This had been added in earlier this week and I haven't had a chance to update.
As a
this.
language that's saying. There's the Senate version, there's the DMV proposal. Is what we're, I guess what we're really looking at right now is here's what the Senate brought over. We had reviewed that before. Here's what the DMV is saying is their position on it.
Mhm.
We didn't take any testimony or anything on.
No, we haven't gotten back to this.
No wonder I'm confused. I don't feel so
This is why
bad.
we're coming,
Yeah.
we're trying to come back to these pieces, because there's obviously a bigger picture. So yes, we need to make sure we're clear. There's a Senate version, there's a proposal in relation to the Senate version, then there is another proposal about changing it as well. And I'm trying to make sure that we understand what came from the Senate and then what the DMV proposes. And then we're gonna hear what else is being proposed.
Yep. So this is the Senate proposal that's in front of you here. Holder of an operator's license may renew that license at any time prior to expiration. If one or more years remain before the expiration, cost is reduced by the number of whole years remaining. And that's to avoid creating a financial incentive to renew early and often. And then all regular application and documentation requirements would apply. So if you're going to need a new photo, that sort of thing, that would all apply. The DMV alternative is to say on not more than one occasion and then sunset this within a year. And then you've seen Representative Tomlinson's language, which would essentially, you could leave this or not. And it's
We have a timer. We
Yeah.
haven't seen it.
separate.
We have
Yeah,
not
okay.
seen, we're going to see it at 11:30. We have not yet seen, you have,
that-
you
that-
wrote it.
Okay, sorry, I apologize.
I suspect has seen it, but not the committee yet. The committee's gonna see it.
I'm sorry,
at 11:30.
I thought it had been circulated at this point. So these are two proposals on that language. Her language goes to the actual term of the license, which is, this can either be kept or not with that language. And it's a separate piece that is, they're related and they overlap a bit, but they're not, it's not the same section. So.
Good question. You look like you did, I'm sorry.
Yes, you're right, you're anticipating. Damian, what is the sunset date proposed by the DMV?
July 126.
Okay, and could we hear from the DMV?
That's where we're going next, yes, ma'am.
Andrew Collier, Commissioner DMV. So the intent of this, as this was explained in the Senate, was to get individuals outside of this administration. So they would keep it outside of this administration term. So the purpose of having a sunset on this is that we're not making. We're trying to implement something quickly and effectively, but it's having a sunset on there just because we don't know what that longer term policy implication is, and kind of. I don't like saying keeping the way it is set up, but going back to how it's currently constructed, and then we can kind of take a deep dive further on if they make a change. To the extent that Representative Couch was commenting, if you're traveling overseas, we do have avenues to handle Vermonters who are overseas, whether their licenses expire. Again, it's a manual process, but we do have avenues for people in the armed forces, just Vermonters who are overseas, and timing doesn't line up. We do have avenues right now to internally kind of handle those as a one-off. It's not, I mean, it doesn't happen often, but by sub 10, I guess, people a year. So really the sunset provision on it is just to, it gets us what the intent was, gets outside of it, and then we can.
Or keep it contained?
Yeah. And not. Because we don't know kind of further what that implication is, so.
How long would it take you to get this up and running?
We think within a couple weeks after passage, it really just that internal, finishing up the internal side, make sure we're clear on, staff's clear and again, as Deputy Commissioner Russo commented, it's a manual process. It's just making sure the staff is up to speed on how to handle these as a larger volume of kind of one-off licenses. So we feel just a couple weeks just to make sure we're fully set internally, but not anything extensive.
And I think at the end of the day, we're only talking about 2 weeks on either side. Time this gets to the governor, he signs it. We're almost in the middle of June anyways, so. You know, I guess I don't have heartburn either way, but I mean, it's basically, we're talking about 2 weeks to maybe 3. You know,
On
difference.
passage versus.
July
July
1st,
1st.
yeah. So.
I would say. Explain it timeframe wise, by the time it gets out of, when this bill gets out of our committee to go onto the floor. It's gotta go to Ways and Means, it's gotta go to Corporation, then it's gotta go to the floor, then it's gotta go back to the Senate.
Yeah.
Then it would have to go to committee conference, because then it would go to the governor.
Governor, and then he has so many
We have to
days to.
Then
yeah.
sign it, then to implement it from there, so a lot of the clock is.
So I'm thinking like middle of
That's what you're
June,
saying.
maybe, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So then we, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understood
Yeah.
what you were coming from. So there was another, okay, go back to Representative Thompson.
I think the proposals from the DMV make sense and are appropriate in terms of capturing the intent. I do think that while it might end up being close to July 1, depending, time is really, really of the essence. So as whatever DMV suggests is administratively tenable, I would hope we could capture that in language to just try to get it as, effective as soon as possible rather than July 1st. So I don't know if that's 2 weeks after passage, that's sort of an odd or maybe an unusual thing to include, but.
If I can just add too, I know the executive order back in, I believe it was January, let's kind of take this off. We haven't seen anything in rulemaking yet that would affect the licenses, and as much as executive order tries to move the needle quickly, changing of the license would have to go through rulemaking, which the federal process, if I'm not mistaken, takes a while in the years to handle. So while we certainly want to move quickly on it, we haven't seen any proposed changes yet on as far as that would affect the real or his license on the rulemaking side. So I mentioned that to the Senate as well. I'm just mentioning it here that we are monitoring that in the background as well.
You're saying on the federal level?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is no action.
Yeah.
There's no action.
So so the action,
Yet or
yeah,
not, there is no action going on that you can see at this moment.
that we have witnessed.
Okay. Representative
Yeah, I don't know if maybe the way to word it is on or before July 1st, so that, the DMV, if they can do it sooner, fine. It doesn't seem like it's gonna capture more than 2 weeks. And I was a little confused, Representative Tomlinson, were you saying you're all right with just one time with this? I'm thinking next year or the year after. And unless you're banking on another amendment that gets in. I mean, it feels like we should just make this permanent. And if there's a problem with it a year or two from now, we'll hear that, too many people are doing it, or, I see it as an advantage for a couple of reasons, and I don't see, how it impacts. I don't expect a lot of people doing it. I don't see any real negative impact, particularly once we get to November and the new system is in place. I guess that was kind of a question to Representative, but
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we heard some testimony from, JFO yesterday about some concerns about, revenue. That were a little hard to really understand because we're lacking some data, but, this seems like a reasonable compromise to dealing with the situation that we're in right now, the one time. In a period where we are also, just in some uncertain times fiscally, with our transportation revenue, so.
Okay, I have a clarifying question, I think, but I appreciate that unless if you're.
No, I'm done, yeah.
What is it, if we say this section is upon passage, which I get, what does it do to you on the, what happens to on the ground if somebody that is trying to get in there and that, is it, how does it help and how does it not help? And what is the difference in terms of when Vermont goes in and upon passage, so we think we can get it in June versus, then you're not gonna be ready if they go to the DMV window, or you'll have the time that it comes out of the, or say it did pass both houses and it was at the government. How does that actually work? Because if upon passage helps people's mindset, I'm tend to want to go that way, but I'm saying, what does that do? Are they going to be able to? Do they get an advantage? Are they actually going to be able to go in and get their license renewed? Well,
Yeah, if it's upon passage by statute, yes, we would have to. It's that training time from verifying that what is proceeding through the House, the Senate, Congress, however the process works, sorry. And following it to making sure that we're training people with the correct language that's in there. That by the time you hit upon passage that we're fully aligned, the staff is fully aligned and able to do this, present the proper information to the public and handle it properly. Versus, I mean, that's why it's not a real operational shift, it's just kind of educational shift of the staff. That's the part where it's like a week or two, just to make sure everyone's fully
and you
up to speed on that.
could start to do that somewhere in the
I think,
process if it gets.
yeah, I think if
There
it's,
is a conference committee and it is that, I mean, you'll have
I
some leeway.
think,
Oh.
the language up to July 1st, we fully believe we can expedite it. It's hard to, I just want to make sure the staff is fully
Okay.
aware.
What about on the side of limiting to one time or not? What is the Modernization Act piece? Or what is your rollout in November? If we are changing a parameter that doesn't exist today, how's your contract work with your programmer? What does that do to delays or not on the system?
So I would, to be clear, we want to make a change to the system for the November rollout because we're in that testing phase right now. The change to the system would probably happen shortly after, so maybe in January or so. And again, it's a programmatic shift change that would have to happen. So I don't want to say, as of November, we can make a change because we're already in that testing phase. I don't want to. We can continue this process, I guess, through, and then they have to develop and make the changes. We have to test it. So probably February next year, we can see this kind of rollback.
How can we keep it, if it's upon pass, or if it's manual anyway, or it's manual, we have the rollout in November. If we limit it to one renewal until the system, I'm assuming once the system is up, there will be some level of programming change if we did allow them to be unlimited upgrades or unlimited updates. If that's on the system, then that's not limiting the interactions of the two-step manual. Then you can, what would be the downside of being able to renew over and over again? If we limited it to once until the system was ready, and then we were considered changing it to be open all the time, to be able to not be limited by your 6 months prior to your birthday, would the system allow us to be able to do that? I mean, in other words, if we had unlimited renewals right now, I don't, because it really is hard to guess at what that would impact. But unlimited seems to me that a computer system can handle that after the fact.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I think the concern right now is we don't want to, again, I don't think people are gonna come in from each month to renew, but because it's a manual process right now, we just don't wanna, we just wanna put a stopgap on it until we fully know when that change in the system happens. So to your point, you could just say, until on or before July 1st of 2026, that, system, it's, the system would then absorb it just,
Okay. Is there also some way for us to come back and fix this in November when we know what we're up against?
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna, add, since Representative Welch asked for clarification before, I do think that the language, and I think Rep. Corcoran mentioned like, sorry, let me. We could also revisit this next session if something, an extenuating circumstance comes up that changes it, or if it proves to be of significant use to Vermonters outside of the use case that we imagined. So I feel like it would be appropriate to move forward with this language, although I would continue to urge us to attempt to do on passage, and to, check back in about it, next session if there are other, considerations, and also to weigh, I assume there's some cost to implementing the changes in the software if it's beyond the scope of the current project. So I would offer that as a perspective on what's been proposed.
All right, so I get the ball rolling. I appreciate everybody's comments, but just to, I think everybody's well versed on these two topics. So I move that we approve section 15 and 16 as passed by the Senate. So unlimited renewals and upon passage.
And the what, I didn't.
And upon passage.
Anybody have anybody have any comments or questions? We don't, I appreciate that. Do we have any questions about it or about what we're doing? Do you want to?
I have a question. So is Rep. Corcoran's move, is that saying we are not going to consider the DMV changes? Or are we looking at passing the Senate's and then voting on the DMVs?
I think what he's.
No, there is no vote.
Okay.
That's not part of the amendment. It's, yeah.
We're saying that we did consider it and we're
Yeah.
not doing it. That's what I think you're saying.
I just wanted
We
some
did
clarification.
consider what the DMV asked for, and we
Yeah.
would be saying in this motion, we're not acting on the
Yeah.
DMV's piece. We're going to have a manual process and they're going to find a way to deal with it, and we're going to move on it so that Vermonters can do what they feel they need to do in the time frame as quickly as possible.
And we're making these sections upon passage.
Correct.
Great.
Might be some heartburn, but in my mind, it's 2 weeks.
Okay.
Time the governor gets it, they can manage.
And if not, we'll all go down and volunteer to help.
Yeah.
Can I show then a show of hands that we're, or not? We got 1, 2, 3. I would say that was unanimous
Great.
in terms of that. So
Check
that
those off.
15 and 16, the committee is, in the bill, we concur with the Senate portion that says you are going to be able to renew your license instead of limited to 6 months before the license annual. You can do it at any point, and that you can do it as many times as you need in the current 2-year or 4-year format. Section 18.
Give me 2 seconds here.
Did we do 17? Was that?
17 was checked off
15.
already.
Okay.
Was 18 too?
18 was not checked off. Right, 17 we did. Yeah, 17 we agreed to, and 18 is open. Remind us of 18, please.
Outreach.
Ledge Council there. Hold on.
Okay. Section 18 is, let me pull this up. There were some edits to this based on discussion in committee. Okay, so we changed the word right to ability, since it's a privilege, not a right. We inserted the word operators before privilege card. And then we did keep the word right with respect to self-attesting to gender markers. So. So this is just public education and outreach from DMV regarding the ability to obtain the various types of licenses or ID cards, right to self-attest with respect to gender marker, and reduced fees that are available to certain individuals.
Representative Todd?
Just for clarification, what's highlighted? Where did that come from?
These were all changes that were recommended for our initial review of the bill. So we didn't say operators privilege card, we just said privilege card. So
these are changes that
previously this said
to the Senate.
Yes, these are your changes that you requested on the after the Senate walk or the walkthrough of the Senate version. So, but we just haven't reviewed them.
I just have a question for the DMV regarding the date, on or before November 15th, 2025. I'm wondering if there is a possibility of moving that date, moving it back. So I guess making it earlier to get some of the initial information out sooner than, and I know it does say on or before November 15th, but just like recognizing that there is some urgency in this.
Yeah, I think it was always our intent to immediately start. I mean, this is, again, as we mentioned before, this is nothing new to us. This is something we already do. We can move it. Again, we were planning on doing this kind of immediately as especially reference to the licensed early renewal. So this is not something we're gonna drag out to indefinite.
So
Our plan, I mean, that's, yeah,
Okay.
that's our plan, is to already have pushed that out. So.
I gotta ask, my mind is swirling with a lot of different pieces. Line 15, section 2 there, an individual's right to self-attest. Is that in the language in the law in Vermont, somewhere else? Is that in the when this was originally set up, or when the X portion of the M and the F and the F? Is that a brand new statement, or is that somewhere has been referenced somewhere else in Vermont law? That somebody has looked at and agreed to, that's not us using a new term or a new slogan or not a new piece that hasn't been looked at all before.
So if we look at the statute here, I don't think it actually says that you have the right to self-attest. I have not gone back through previous DMV bills to find if there is language in there talking about adding in the option for it to say M, F, or X, or if that was just DMV policy. So I unfortunately don't have a good answer for you. Right now, you're required to furnish documents that provide your name, date of birth, place of birth, and then proof of citizenship or legal presence in the country, proof of your mailing address, which could be like pieces of mail, something like that. And then any other documentation required by the Real ID Act. So that's what the statute currently provides. We don't have additional language that I'm aware of that specifies rights related to gender identity, but I may have not be aware of something that was in a prior motor vehicle bill.
We usually refer to that term, or maybe I can't even say that. We just passed a proposition, a constitutional amendment about rights, and they're an awfully big word. And we're the transportation committee that is dealing with drivers like we're not a civil rights portion of or however that works. If we are making something new, that is beyond what I think our committee's piece is all I'm trying to say. We're not making a new declaration that would involve, maybe I'm totally off base, and that's what I guess I'm looking for you to say. I am not disputing that, or I am totally, obviously with our passage of everything else, people can put whatever they want. The word rights has been in a lot of other things, and I want to make sure we're not the first ones to use it when it comes to this, or if that makes, or maybe that's not a concern that I should have. I just know that when I heard rights, I think Constitution, and are we using a bigger word than what we mean it? Because people already they get to pick whatever they want on their license.
So,
But I didn't read it in the Constitution that it was a right to pick whatever you want on your license. Anyway, maybe I'm talking out it. I'm not trying to make a bigger statement. I'm trying to make sure people get to do what's already prescribed, but I'm not saying the transportation department or the transportation committee makes a bigger civil rights statement than that. That's not our spot to do that. Do you have a question or a comment?
So currently it's male, female, other. Do they have to, what do they do to check off one of those boxes currently? Or do they have to provide their birth certificate?
So I just check.
So you don't have to, but as far as the Real ID Act, you have to provide a birth certificate.
So you have to,
Mail, what was the?
so you have the certain documents that we reviewed to authenticate that you keep the standards. As far as gender though, is something that you can check. You can check.
You can self-attest.
Yes, I mean, you're
words, but
self-attest.
I'm not putting a word we're not putting a word in the constant, that some people use at a totally different level. We're
Right.
we're just trying to keep the policy the same way that it is.
Not having in this, so my point is not having the self-attest language in there. We're currently doing it. So I don't know why we need to have the self-attestation because we're allowing it.
We're already doing all this section, but I think they just wanted to
I
reinforce.
want the ability to do it. I'm questioning that
Right.
word. So Representative White had her hand up, and then Representative Thomas.
Yeah, I just have another question.
I'm not
for
sure
DMV.
I can't sure if I can answer your question or not.
So if I brought my birth certificate, if I were born a male, but I am living a life as a female, and if I went to the DMV with my birth certificate that said I was a male, and I wanted to get a Real ID, and I think I'm using the right term, a Real ID, which I can use to travel across the border, and also my driver's privilege card. Is it a
So
Real ID
across the
or?
border, that'd be the enhanced, but still
The
be a real.
enhanced, the enhanced Real ID. Okay. Could I get an enhanced Real ID with my birth certificate that says I'm a male, but I've filled out a form that says I'm a female, and I can get all that? And that is currently the practice at the DMV. Okay, thank you.
So that's my
Right,
point.
And that's the concern that would change, and also with the executive order that the commissioner mentioned in January, it caused a lot of confusion. A lot of people were not clear if that was still the case or not. So I think a part of, and I understand the DMV already does communications around this, but I understand the the question, why would we do this if it's already clear to people that we're doing it? But I think there has been a lot of confusion because of changes that are happening to other forms of IDs like passports and intent that's been stated by the administration to make similar changes around real IDs, although that has not taken effect yet.
I mean, mine's just, maybe a question for Damien. The self-attest is under Vermont LG law. If the federal government was to change that, or, some fears came to reality for some individuals, should we clarify the right to self-attest on the individual operator's privilege card? Because that's your real ID. Should that say based on Vermont laws? Because what if the feds do it? It's not a right to self-attest because it's not allowed on the federal level now. Should we clarify that we're talking about under current Vermont law? Just make that reference so it's clear.
I don't,
Because this could be conflicted messages that people think, I don't know. I just started.
So an individual's right in Vermont to self-attest?
Under the privilege, because the privilege card is
Yeah.
talking about the real ID, and if that changes, then that we wouldn't have that right anymore. Whether we agree with it or not, I don't think it would be there.
so,
Say that again, Ted.
The self-attesting for the privilege card, so the privilege card is referring to real
That's the
ID.
privilege card, not the real ID.
Well, the privilege card is a real ID, that's, no?
No.
I thought it's, maybe I'm mixing all up.
No,
I'm confused.
real ID,
Okay.
the privilege card is not a real ID. That's my
so,
understanding, correct?
okay,
Okay, well,
let's back up.
Disregard everything I said. let's
Okay.
move on.
Okay. For
Yeah.
operators licenses.
Yeah.
Operators licenses either include a real ID or an enhanced driver's license option, which allows you to cross the border. Real ID is good for getting in, flying domestically, going through TSA, going into federal buildings, et cetera. You guys have probably all seen the news about lines around the block, other states that haven't been on top of this, like Vermont has. I was happy yesterday. I was like, I haven't seen any lines across the street. We're doing well. When I saw the news footage. Anyway, that aside from the fact, but Vermont has been on top of this. So our regular operator's license is real ID compliant right now under federal law. For folks who either don't want to or cannot meet the requirements for real ID, which include showing that you're either a citizen or legally present in the country, we have an operator's privilege card, which is a state-only ID. It does not get you into federal buildings. You cannot board a plane with it. And it is a state-only ID. It's a creature of state law. It is valid as an operator's license when you cross state lines, but you can't use it to enter a federal installation or for any federal ID purposes. So that is like a driver's license, but it's not subject to the real ID or enhanced driver's license requirements. And then for folks who don't want to drive, we have the non-driver ID. The operator's privilege card and non-driver ID, unless and until the federal government attempts to preempt states from issuing IDs that are at all not compliant with federal law. And I don't know if they have the ability to do that. But unless and until there is some sort of court ruling that the federal government could do that, I know there is pressure currently from the administration. There's been talk about trying to crack down on states that are issuing privilege cards because they don't necessarily comply with real ID. This gets into a states' rights issue, and I am not prepared to go there. But unless and until there's change on that, we will be able to do what we want with these. You could issue these as 25-year IDs if you want. I'm not recommending that. Chris Roop would come running in there and take me out of the chair. But you could issue these as 25-year IDs. You can require whatever documentation you want. You can allow people to attest to their gender however you want.
And so I got this. So I take that argument and back it up to the first one, individual operator license. Those are potentially real ID, right?
Right, and
But
there,
I said before, do we need to specify that Vermont, under Vermont law?
I think the more I'm thinking about this,
Yeah.
when we talked about it before, I think the word that we want is ability, not right. There, because I don't see a clear right that's spelled out in law. I think you do have some arguments under State Public Accommodations Act and other things, potentially, that the state can't discriminate against you on the basis of gender identity, et cetera. But I think that the word ability there is probably the better one. The one thing I'm concerned about is if we say under existing law or under Vermont, if we say under Vermont law, I'm a little more comfortable with it. I would caution against saying under existing Vermont law, because I don't think that addresses the confusion that motivated the Senate to put this in here, which was to try to provide clear information from a trusted source about what your actual rights are in Vermont. Or your ability is in Vermont when it comes to getting an ID.
And I think that goes into clarity because if we don't reference from current or Vermont law, one individual might think that they, regardless of what the feds do, they can still do it.
Yeah.
So that's why I just wanted to be clear of
Right.
Are we doing the outreach?
So then you could say ability under Vermont law to self-attest with respect to the gender, you know.
Yeah, and that's just for clarification. Like I said, it's
And this is session law too, so if the law changes at some point in the future to supersede this or preempt this or anything like that, the agency or the department at that point, sorry, I've got the agency sitting here next to the department. It's the department at that point can update their guidance and say, we're no longer allowed to do this for real IDs, but we do have privilege cards and non-driver IDs that are available. And then I absolutely
That's
can.
not screen.
No, it's not. And I'll
Okay.
pull it up for you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So. So an individual's ability under Vermont law to self-attest with respect to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's take a look here.
Sorry, it's gonna.
You're fine. You got time.
Great.
I'll make sure that we communicate exactly what we want and that we make sure that there's an outreach. There's an outreach to Vermonters. So. An individual's ability to obtain an operator's license, operator's privilege card, and an individual's ability under Vermont law to self-attest with respect to gender right. Operating privilege card for non-driver. Okay. Anybody have any questions, comments, or regarding the date or the language or anything in section 18? Does anybody else want to make any comment?
I was just looking Representative Thomas there.
Yeah, we
sort of.
No, I mean, I'm not ready. We're going to vote, but I want to make sure if this is concerns, we want to we have, I guess I would say that we have a commitment from the commissioner here on YouTube. He is, if this were to pass into the law, should it go through the whole process, that he is making the effort to move as quickly as possible and is not waiting for November 15th to start. And we're all going to be back in January. Does anybody have anybody else? Are we, oops, go ahead.
I just have one. So should we ask for any type of just like report, like next session on how this is going, how many people have taken advantage of this? I'm just throwing that out there.
I think that can be maybe informal, it needs to be in this,
I think we
session, yeah, just, well, like Matt said, we'll be.
I'm pretty sure that we're gonna, but I understand the point, and there are times that if it is a particular area, you will, if you're following the conference committee on our T bill, there's a number of spots in the language that are basically put in the language in the law to require the secretary to send an email the update on a couple of things. So that concern is legit, is what I'm saying. In some places that's been that way. I feel pretty comfortable that we're going to be here, but that's up to if the members want to comment on that. I've seen it. I am seeing it in the language in the T bill that's been added from the Senate that literally says we will provide an update. So it can be done. I don't know that it needs to be, but it is done all the time. Does anybody else? Are you saying you want to do that, or are you just asking?
I guess I'm saying that I would like to hear an update next session about how it's going, but I don't feel strongly that we need to write it into the language. I think it'll probably come up, yeah. So, yeah, so I'm comfortable with the revised language that we've put up there.
Okay, is everybody willing to, or we're gonna vote whether we're keeping section 18 and agree with the Senate portion of as this change, or we're gonna propose this change, so now we're not agreeing with it as is, we're making a change, right?
Yes.
We're making a change to section 18 of what the Senate put in. Does everybody agree with the changes that we put in?
Yes.
Okay, that's our new section 18.
Okay, what's the next section that we're looking at?
It goes all the way to 43.
Yes, 43. So I have alternative language that you asked me to draft on this. Do you want me to pull that up or go through the existing, or how would you like to proceed?
A real, well, let's just get to 43 that we see it there. We'll get a real, it's pretty short, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's actually, it's 39 now. So
it's now
it was 43 in the Senate version.
So we took care of 38 through 40. I mean, I wasn't.
Yeah, that was the,
Those were okay.
Yep. Those were gone.
Yeah, 41 we
deleted.
killed, 42 we checked out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the ATV section is now section 38. So that's and
The old 43 is the new 38.
the old 43 is the new 39.
It's 42. Two wheel ATVs.
So that was now 38
Okay, so
and
42 is 30.
42 is 38,
Okay.
43 is 39.
Okay.
Okay. So the Senate's proposal was to create the Motor Vehicle Purchase and Use Tax and Inspection Study Committee, which is an entirely non-legislative study committee, composed of the commissioner, the Vermont Vehicle and Automotive Distributors Association, insurance agents, and Vermont Community Action Partnership. So it's a 4-person study committee convened by the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles. They would study the assessment of purchase and use tax on motor vehicles and inspection of motor vehicles whose onboard diagnostic malfunction indicator light is on, including the following issues. And then this was the potential fiscal impact of the state to the state of assessing the purchase and use tax against the amount that a used vehicle was purchased for rather than the clean trade-in value, potential for assessing the purchase and use tax against the amount that the used vehicle was purchased for if the difference between the purchase price and the clean trade-in value is equal to or less than the cost of repairs necessary for the vehicle to pass inspection, assessment of purchase and use tax on vehicles that were purchased and first registered in another state prior to the vehicle owner moving to Vermont and registering the vehicle in Vermont, including any potential impacts that the current manner in which the purchase and use tax is assessed on such vehicles may have on vehicle owners' decisions to move to Vermont or register their vehicles in Vermont or both. potential changes to the statute and rules governing the purchase and use tax that could mitigate any negative impacts on vehicle owners' decisions to relocate to Vermont or register their vehicles in Vermont or both, and potential modifications to the periodic inspection manual to permit vehicles whose onboard diagnostic malfunction indicator light is illuminated to pass inspection if the issue causing the indicator light to illuminate does not affect the safety of the vehicle with respect to the operator, passengers, or other vehicles. And I think the only instance that I'm aware of in which that indicator light would be on is either a faulty indicator light or an emissions related issue where it's not specifically a safety issue. So I think the other instances, we looked at the inspection manual when we were in here earlier and went through the instances, and they can be, it's lights related to, for example, the brake system and other things like that, that can trigger a reject. But if that's a faulty indicator light, so that's the fault isn't clearing out after the repair, I think that's the only potential instance there outside of emissions, when there are multiple indicator lights depending on your vehicle that may go on related to emissions. Check engine. I know I had an instance with one of my vehicles where it was an emissions related issue that, thank goodness, was covered under warranty. Another story, but it wasn't the check engine light. It was another light that came on that triggered that because some valve was jamming in the emission system. So anyway, so that's that. It would be a January 15th, 2026 report. And otherwise no funding set aside for it. And then,
so one of those items to look at is if you want to move into the state and you bring in your vehicle, I think they're saying,
so that was
which tax is collected. But I'm just clarifying, if you pay tax in another state and you brought your vehicle here, you get credit for that tax you did pay.
I believe that is correct.
Some states,
So
I'm sure, I don't know if they might not collect tax. I don't know, but.
So this was a late addition in the Senate, and it's not something that I had a chance to do research on before it came across. I did see the commissioner nodding his head over there, so you may want to phone a friend on this, but I'm going to pull up the language here around the computation of taxable costs. And if you want to come back to me.
Yeah, I'm just curious about what we're going to get out of that. Is it the amount to understand how many times people have to come here to pay tax and move? They want to move here, then they want to bring their vehicle and register it. They're going to have to pay tax, purchase and use tax. And then if they haven't already paid tax, how many times that happens and how much it is? Is that what the study's gonna do?
Yeah, so here I'll pull up the statute. Just took me a minute to find it. So currently under the exceptions to the tax, it provides that this tax does not apply to motor vehicles on which estate sales or use tax has been paid either by the person applying for registration or the person who at the time of the tax payment was the spouse of the person applying for registration. However, if the tax paid in another state is less than the Vermont tax, the tax due shall be the difference. And so I think the issue that may be coming up here is if the other state computes its use tax differently or charges a lower rate. then you're coming in potentially and paying a tax again as you come to Vermont on that.
The incremental.
You're paying the incremental difference, but if you're coming from a state that either doesn't charge that tax or computes the value of the car for purposes of the tax differently or charges a lower tax rate, I think then you'll be due on the difference. And I think the argument was that that is discouraging people relocating to Vermont from registering their cars here. But
one more question, and is there a time? So if I bought my car 4 years ago, brand new, paid tax in Rhode Island, whatever it is, and then I come here 4 years later and register it, and then, Vermont says, oh, you gotta purchase and use tax, and then I say, well, wait, I already paid, whatever. So is there a time limit?
I don't know the answer to that.
Doesn't say there is, so.
I don't believe it. I think as a statute reads, it's on the.
Yeah.
Show that tax paid on that vehicle, just like a remote vehicle.
Yeah, does the DMV inform people when they register?
When they register?
Yeah, that if you've already paid some tax, you get credit.
Yeah, we're not double dipping on.
No.
So I think that's part of the education. Yeah, it's part of the process.
Okay, yeah. And so then going back to my question, is the study to find out how much that happens and is it impacting people from moving to Vermont? Is that
I think is essentially the goal there is to look at that and look at whether there's a way to mitigate any of those negative impacts.
Could be registering, I guess. But you have to continue to register in the other state that you don't live in now.
Right, or drive a vehicle with expired registration.
Yeah.
And out-of-state plates. I've never seen that occur, but
I'm just trying to understand, and this question is also for the DMV, but so it sounds like the onus is on the purchaser and the registrant of the vehicle. Like, again, if you purchase a vehicle from out of state and you're registering it in Vermont, the purchaser needs to provide the receipt to Vermont to kind of show, like, if they did pay sales tax, which is different from purchase and use tax in out of state.
I think you just bring in your bill of sale. I've had experience when we moved back up from Massachusetts. Just bring your bill of sale.
And you just need to make sure you've kept that and that you're, because I can see someone paying tax in out of state and then coming here and registering, oh, this is how much you owe, okay. They could be paying double tax and not really recognizing that they didn't have to. Is that a possibility?
I guess if you don't communicate that, I mean, I think our team is very well versed on, if you're coming in from out of state registration, that we're not automatically, if you don't say you've paid tax, that we're automatically assessing tax.
Right, just have stuff approved, just show me.
Right, and there's, we're gonna help people get that information in. I guess what I'm trying to say, we're not, if you come in and say, hey, I'm registering my just moved in, registering, we're not just gonna assess tax, we're gonna ask the questions, we're gonna try to help. I mean, that's.
And if I'm a Vermont resident, but I purchased, say, a used car in New York State and then registered it here, came back and registered it here in Vermont. I could have paid tax in New York and paying tax in Vermont upon registration as well.
If you pay tax in New York, it depends on what the tax rate is. I'm not familiar with New York. And you can show that you pay tax.
So again, but the onus is on the registrant to bring the correct documentation and to kind of be aware that, okay. Thank you.
Well, when we moved here from Virginia in 2003, we ended up having to pay taxes. Bring our cars here, so I think was an unpleasant surprise.
But yeah, there are no taxes in Virginia?
I don't remember why we had to do that. It just was, the way it was.
I think that if the tax is less than Vermont's, you'll pay the difference.
Yeah.
So if New York State, I think New York State may be more.
Yeah.
I know their sales
I
taxes.
think this is relatively new. I don't know, when did we amend this? Was it effective?
So
For some reason, I thought it was relatively new, but I think.
I do remember that they were able to calculate it almost immediately, whatever it was.
$2,000, how much?
So these exceptions date back to they were first added in 1959, but this section has been updated well over a dozen times since then.
What was the last?
2023.
There we go. Was that time from now?
2017, 2021, 2023
All right.
were the last three amendments on it.
Yeah.
There were actually two times it was amended in 2017 session.
So I'm going crazy.
Or 2018, yeah.
We could.
So yeah, you've made multiple adjustments to this. Some of them, I know one of them is related to the timber cutting, timber removal, et cetera, which is the last exception on there. There's a limited exception for that. There's some repeals in here. And yeah, this may have been updated in the last couple of years. I'd have to go back in the Green Book and look through it. But yeah, so that was something that was raised at the late in the process in the Senate. One of the senators had gotten a call from some constituents who had recently moved here and were frustrated with having to pay the tax after having already paid tax in their previous state.
Yeah, thanks. So I brought up the registration form and it's very clear what the policy and the procedure is. So I think we're beating a dead horse. Another point, say check engine light. Now, we got testimony yesterday that the check engine light is a subset of these lights. What was, I looked in the
It's an
testimony.
onboard diagnostic
Right,
malfunction indicator light is the term we use,
okay,
which it depends on your car and the maker of your car. Some cars will have multiple lights, other cars will not. So this is what I was getting at earlier is there was testimony about check engine light often being an indicator of an emission system malfunction. And I was mentioning that one of my cars has a second light that goes on, which is like, it says EDC or something like that. Which when it went on several years ago, I was like, I have no idea what this is. It's not check engine. I brought it in and they said, oh, it's a valve in your emission system that has stuck.
so
And so your system's not working correctly.
so my question is there any need to change it to that broader term?
We're already using that
Okay,
broader
thank you. I'm
term.
sorry. for
Yeah.
picking the-
So right, because there are others too that might be for like
Right.
brake system
Mine
and
has about a dozen.
right. And the cars with the newer displays often will tell you what system is malfunctioning. So there are multiple ways
Okay.
that the system's going to tell you, and it's going to depend on the maker.
Okay, thank you.
So
So now there's a proposed to change language.
right. So let me pull that up. I drafted this up this morning. So the chair had asked me to draft this up, and the outline for this came from the department based on a conversation with the chair, is my understanding. Let me
And I haven't seen it yet, but we are trying to understand that we have an inspection issue that we've heard of potential amendment, and we know we have constant inspection related issues. We heard from the Lieutenant Governor on affordability and private sales and tax pieces. I don't want to leave out any pieces, but there's multiple things that people want to understand. What I also want to make sure that it is understood, and it may not be reflected in here, is that barring the issue that we just worked on, outside of that, the DMV's primary goal is the Modernization Act, the $46 million computer that we spent on, and then that phase 3 rolls out in November. And I want to be very sensitive to the fact that we really need that to be their number one priority and get the value out of that investment. So I am certainly inclined to, we don't start our work on the DMV bill until a little later. They said it starts on earlier, probably why they asked for a different thing, but I want to be clear, we want the DMV focused on their number one priority in October and November and December, or right up through testing up through that part and then into implementation. We didn't spend that much money, 46 million they have to respond to what we give them, but I'm saying we've known inspection's been an issue for a long time. It's going to continue to be an issue. We can commit to work on that. We have heard in testimony from the DMV that they do have a process for appealing values, that we also, maybe they need to look at it again so that the appraisal of the vehicle doesn't, overshadow the savings of the cost. So looking for something that will understand that they need to go back and address these areas and look at them and come back to us next year, while also keeping their priority and focus on their number one task that will continue to free up resources within the department moving forward. That this implementation should give substantial, and it has already given additional resources. We must not forget that there were multiple positions eliminated in the DMV because the lines are so different, and because the mail is processed so much faster, and because everything can be done so much smoother. They have saved quite a bit of money within the department. We need phase 3 to be their primary focus. We will then have more resources, and we know that these have been longstanding issues that we're not going to fix between now and January 15th. So, but we're also trying to be very clear of the affordability message from the Lieutenant Governor and affordability as it relates to inspections. We're asking them to work on those. That's the language we're trying to get to. I don't know if this does that or not. That's my goal.
We'll see. Okay. So this would require on or before the end of January that the commissioners submit a written report to this committee, Ways and Means Committee, and then the Senate Committee on Finance and on Transportation. The reason that Finance and Ways and Means are looped in is because some of this relates to taxing. And so anything on purchase and use tax would have to go through their committee too. And so it's regarding the process for determining the taxable cost of a used motor vehicle for purposes of the purchase and use tax, and the impact of annual motor vehicle safety and emissions inspections on Vermonters with lower income. So the report shall include at a minimum the following: the number of persons during calendar years 24 and 25 who utilized the dealer appraisal process, the age and type of vehicles for which the dealer appraisal process was used, the difference between the clean trade-in value and the appraised value of the vehicles that used that process, the number of appeals of the taxable cost of motor vehicles that were filed in 24 and 25, the number of appeals that resulted in a revision of the taxable cost, and the difference between the original cost and the revised cost. A summary of issues identified by persons contacting the email address established later in the section. I'll get to that. That was a proposal in the DMV's language. A summary of funding and other assistance of it related to annual motor vehicle safety and emissions inspections that is available to Vermonters with a lower income. An examination of the potential adverse impacts of annual safety and emissions inspections on Vermonters with lower income, and potential administrative and legislative options to mitigate those impacts while ensuring vehicle safety and air quality. and any recommendations for legislative action. This does not address the moving to Vermont question, because that was not outlined in the email that I received from DMV related to their conversation with the chair. I could certainly add that language in without much effort. And then C, that email address I mentioned, I think it would actually be email address or other electronic means. I drafted this quickly, so I apologize for the inconsistency, which basically allows folks to contact DMV regarding concerns with the purchase and use tax process, and that the commissioner has to make folks aware that they have this opportunity. And it essentially gets public response. We are focused on the process. I do imagine that they're going to get a number of complaints about paying the tax, period. And I'm sure you're all familiar with objections to paying tax anyway, but this would allow them to basically say, you know, we got 25 complaints about having to pay the tax. And then we got complaints about the appeals process wasn't clear, or I felt like the appraisal process, I couldn't find a dealership to do it, whatever it is, so that they can then come back and say, well, these are the actual issues that people identified to us. And DMV has not seen this language yet, so I don't want to imply that this is their blessing. This is just what I did with the email that I got from their counsel.
So unless during the appeals process, the person who is attempting to register has to submit some type of a form for their income, how will DMV know that they're low income?
So the appeals process doesn't actually relate to the lower income.
Okay, so how would DMV know that a person coming in to register their vehicle is low income?
That's not actually something they have to know for purposes of this. The lower income only relates to vehicle safety and emissions inspections. So we're looking at funding and other assistance that might be available to them. What's out there? We've talked a little bit about, aren't there programs out there already? But we haven't.
This examination of potential adverse impacts of the annual
safety and emissions inspections.
Right. But I mean, there are probably some low income people that don't take advantage of whatever programs we may have available.
Right. I'm not sure how to, I mean, you were certainly not asking inspection station mechanics to say,
Correct.
Can you define your income?
Right.
But I think that the look here was at, is there a way that we can sort of summarize this? I think the DMV's language proposed 7. I think I added 8 to try to get at, you know, is there a way that they can identify what potential adverse impacts are?
Right.
It would be their speculation, though. You're right.
Right.
They can't go out and survey
Right.
unless there are folks who email them and say, but that's related to the purchase and use tax. So,
I mean,
yeah.
okay, I don't know how we get that. I don't know how DMV will be able to get.
Yeah, I mean, they are not running a public assistance program there where they can say, folks on Reach Up
Right.
dealt with this.
Yeah, first, I just want to say, I'm a little, I get confused by this process. So the DMV's written you a letter and you've written this as a possibility. We haven't gotten any testimony from the DMV on why, and I'm not sure, you know, Ledge Council's the best one to sell us the amendment.
I'm not
blaming
telling you,
anybody.
yeah.
I'm just sort of saying this seems like, you know, maybe the wrong person sitting there, so we can ask questions. Well, why are we doing this? You know, what are we going to get out of it? So it appears that it's in reaction to what came out of the Senate. The DMV is going, hey, you know, we like some of it, but we got a couple problems with the rest of it. I think the DMV should be here to, you know, argue their case. And since this is the first time we've seen this, it's hard to even digest it.
But this, The other language wasn't from DMV, right? That was a Senate item.
That was the Senate. So
Yeah.
the study committee, which is now
Yes.
section 39, was added by the Senate.
Yeah,
My understanding is that after the walkthrough of that, at some point, DMV spoke with the chair. And then with the chair's consent, forwarded me a proposal for an alternative for the committee to consider. I was asked to draft that up. I got it drafted up this morning, so DMV has not had a chance to review this. I'm sorry. It's just the nature of the timing right now. But yeah, they can speak to why they think this is better. I'm just walking you through the language without, not for or against. And certainly you've already identified one issue with the language, which comes out of, drafting it quickly and not really thinking about, you're right. Inspection mechanics aren't going to know who's lower income and who was told they had a vehicle that was going to get rejected and then never showed up again or something like that, or took the vehicle off the road. And I don't know that there's any way to actually track that with what we have currently in place. That said, here's the rough language that I got put together this morning between 8:30 and
yeah, I'm not.
I arrived.
I'm
So
just saying that the process is
Is
I'm hard
exactly
to
the same
catch
one.
up with.
It is and it is the same one that we used in terms of a walkthrough, and then the DMV would comment on APs just like the agency would comment on APs. We're not going to solve this part today because it doesn't yet have any port and any piece to the concern about inspections and a review of the timing of inspections either. What we are, when we did go through the section 43 from the Senate and then the DMV view and then the lieutenant governor's testimony, there was a pretty strong consensus that 43 needed work. And that's what we're trying to do. We're not there yet. And we will hear from them before we're not going to get 43 checked off today. But we have trying to go in a direction that's going to address the pieces that we're at. But 43 is still in there as the way the Senate had it. This is direction that we're potentially going into, but it doesn't do enough yet.
Conversation starter.
Yeah, and we don't have, I don't see a copy of it in there.
Yeah,
no, I haven't even sent this to Cam yet. I mean,
Yeah, I'm not dissing anything. I'm just sort of saying,
Yeah.
it's hard for me to process it in this way.
We're not going to check it off. It's what it is.
You have nothing to check off.
Yes, this is, you're right. From that perspective, it is not, it is a walkthrough, and that is it. So I don't know if we got to the end of it yet or not. But
we're at the end.
we need to, which is perfect, Representative Couch, because we've got to move into our other topic here at some point, and we're going to have to continue to wordsmith this. People have concerned, there are sections about 43 that they do don't want to do. 43 is under development, I guess, is their potential revision to try to encompass more
Under construction.
while also understanding the challenges they're up against. Representative Work?
Just to clarify, Damian, that language was additional language to 43.
It was a replacement.
It was replacement language. Okay.
Yeah.
And-
So instead of doing a non-legislative study committee, the proposal is to just have them do a report on certain things. And yeah,
Okay.
that's all it is.
And to Representative McCoy's question about low income, the impact on low income Vermonters of low income. I mean, it isn't our intent impact on Vermonters kind of cost of living. Like, yes, lower income Vermont, this inspections have been proven to be difficult for lower income Vermonters, but for all Vermonters. I think that's the question, is like, this is a cost. Does it have to be annual? Could it be biannual? So just maybe a suggestion on the language, like
Right. So an alternative might be to say, identify potential ways to reduce the cost of costs related to inspections for Vermonters.
Yeah.
You know, or to make the process of getting a car inspected and approved with respect to safety and emissions less expensive. And I could certainly work on language like that. And I think that wouldn't require knowing someone's income.
Right.
It would just, you know, it
This
would.
cost impacts all Vermonters. It just is felt more poignantly on lower income Vermonters.
Right.
And so, two other things really quickly, just, on that language that you had up on the board. There was, asking for recommendations from the study committee or whomever. And I'm just wondering, I guess, two questions. Number one, do we want to clarify or kind of add, to their potential recommendations, including the potential of extending the inspection, you know, requiring inspection every 2 years as opposed to 1 year. And I guess my other question is, do we want to put any tinted windows language in there, recognizing that I think we cut all that from.
Rolling backwards here.
I know, but if we're gonna have a study committee,
Yeah.
do we want them to address tinted windows?
I think we know what the issue is. It's how to-
Tinted windows separately.
And maybe the answer is no, right?
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, I'm not sure that you would get anything new out of. And I don't want to speak for the department, but the department proposed taking the tinted window language out. So I'm not sure that a report from them would give you anything different on
I
that,
think we
but,
were out because it was so, didn't quite know what people would have said,
yeah.
but, okay.
But yeah, you can certainly put that in. You could, yeah.
Oh,
Thank
this is, yeah.
But we're not gonna get it. It's just time if they don't do it now. I'd love to say let's take a break, but if we do, we're not gonna get this next agenda item on it. So, and there are about 10 things floating around that need to be worked on. So we're going to shift our agenda. We have everything but 43 and 44.
Yep.
Left on the bill. Except we did, and you need to update 44 is now gonna be what, 30, it's gonna be 40 or something like that,
39.
39.
Yes.
So we did agree to change the effective date of certain sections, so we know we can
Already done.
44, and we know that you can work on 43 with also something related to inspections we're gonna have to work on.
I can make an update to.
And then we gotta get, and then we'll have to get some other piece there, but that's,
Yeah.
and in addition to all of that, you had seen an earlier piece that there is a part of the conference committee that we're not, it's gonna be now in the afternoon. They weren't available for this part, that's gonna be in the afternoon. What we are gonna do and try to push through now is, Representative Tomlinson has an amendment that she wants us to consider potentially for S-123. And we're gonna get a walkthrough. You do have that emailed to you, I believe.
Or it's on the committee page.
Oh, it's on the committee page, okay. And
Should I just do it?
we're gonna have you do, oh, I'm sorry, we're gonna ask you to do a sort of intro and then a walkthrough, I guess, is my thought.
So, yeah, I can walk through the substance you want to introduce.
Yeah, I'll give some background, and I think substance is pretty easy to explain verbally. So we heard testimony around concerns from the trans and non-binary community here in Vermont around having access to appropriate identification. And we've already been talking about one piece of that proposal this morning, which was the ability to renew a license early so that you have that longer runway of identification. And additionally, Monica Lard, who came in and testified, spoke to the need for an extended license renewal period in addition to that, and that those two things paired would be a really powerful step towards offering cover to marginalized Vermonters during this really scary time for them. And so yesterday we heard from JFO about the potential impact of an 8-year renewal period. And just, I think it's really important to note that that preliminary analysis, to my understanding, was based on language laid out in H351, which would have required everyone essentially to switch over to 8-year licenses and to do so on a certain time frame. And so that, raised a lot of concerns about revenue volatility. And this amendment attempts to respond to some of the concerns raised by JFO and takes a quite different approach from 351. And what it does is it just adds a third option of a renewal period. So there would still be a 2-year renewal period and would add an 8-year renewal period. There's no requirement to switch to 8 years or any particular incentive. The cost of the 8-year identification would just be double the cost of whatever the 4-year equivalent of that license is. And so theoretically, this would, not create as much revenue volatility, although of course there would still be some. And we saw that when we added a 4-year option to our licenses and IDs, which was also a benefit to Vermonters to have that longer renewal period. And so I just want to make sure to be really clear about why the 8 years. There's been some talk around, well, the current 4 years that we have would allow people to get beyond this current administration. But the reality is that we don't know what administration we will have at the next inauguration. We don't know what that administration's position will be. And even if they're not openly stating and taking action on intent to disenfranchise trans and non-binary community members, it's not clear how, high of a priority or how quickly they would be able to take action that would enable people to have appropriate identification. And there could be ongoing litigation that could impact people's ability. And so what we've heard from this group, the Vermont Queer Legal Professionals, which represents dozens of, it's compromised, but it includes dozens of queer Vermonters who are legal professionals, and they hear from even more Vermonters who are experiencing these issues. And what they have recommended as the strongest way forward to achieve this goal of protecting Vermonters' rights during this time is to have that 8-year period, given all those concerns that were laid out. And so I just, it strikes me that this is a really powerful opportunity for the legislature to concretely extend cover for trans and non-binary Vermonters during this time when they're facing increasing attacks on their rights. And I just, I really want to, I know we're just doing a walkthrough, but I just really want to invite the rest of the committee to join me in supporting this really concrete step. We all, at least to my ear, in the House, joined in a resolution supporting the rights of trans and non-binary Vermonters in a resolution. And I think that this is a tangible way to actually take action on that commitment that we voiced, and to uphold the commitment that we made when we made a choice as a state to say Vermonters can self-attest their gender markers. And this gives the opportunity for Vermonters to do that for as long as we can make that possible in a time frame that's already federally permitted and 25 states have taken on, to continue to be able to have that opportunity that we paved the path for. So that's the intent of this amendment. And if Damien wants to speak more to the details, again, I think it's pretty straightforward in the language, but I can hand it over to Damien if that would be helpful.
All right. So like Representative Tomlinson said, it is pretty straightforward as amendments go. So what we're doing is we're adding in that your license will expire on the second, fourth, or eighth anniversary. So right now it's just the second or fourth. So this would allow individuals to elect a 2-year, 4-year, or 8-year license. And again, and then for privilege cards, second, fourth, or eighth birthday of the applicant following the date of issuance. And then adding in an 8-year fee of $124, which is double the current 4-year fee. And then slightly less than quadruple the current 2-year fee. So if you note in the fine print on Chris Roop's chart yesterday, I think the 4-year and this 8-year would be $1,550 per year. And I can't remember, it's like 2-year, yeah, that $1,950. There we go. Quick math. So anyway, that is that. And then with the non-driver ID, $29 for a 4-year non-driver and $58 for an 8-year non-driver. There is no 2-year non-driver ID. And then renewal is again 4th or 8th anniversary, with 4-year being 29, 8-year being 58. And that's it. So it's a lot of words, but really all we're doing is adding an 8-year option to each of them. All right.
Questions?
Have we heard from the DMV on? Remember if we've heard the DMV's input on what this 8-year change would do? We saw some, some financial extrapolating yesterday, really just expressing some concern about the pacing of when money would come in. But, in general, to me, it seemed like a positive thing for Vermonters. There's not a cost aside from this potential change in the flux of revenue coming in to the DMV, but I'm curious what the DMV has to say.
Right.
You're welcome to answer if you start to right now, if you'd like to, but we're.
So just a couple of quick points. One, CDLs would not be able to be included in this. That's a federal document. Some of the issues that we've, again, just briefly identified in this, our vendor costs would increase because you get pricing based on set number for 2 and 4 years. So our vendor costs for printing the IDs themselves, if I can change, we don't know what that change would be yet. There is an increased cost. We're trying to get a hard figure on the development costs. Again, I'm only speaking for after we go live on the system for the operator license section. But there will be a change because if I come in to renew for a 4-year, I might still be good on my photo. But if I come in, but now say I go for an 8-year, we have to have, programming that out to flag those IDs that if you're gonna opt for an 8-year, in your photo, because photos are only good for, we have to 8 or 9 years. 9 years. So programming that in. So we've been trying to get some numbers, and there's a cost associated with that change as well. And I just want to be crystal clear on this part. The federal government may change the rules. This is kind of just sidestepping it briefly. And if the intent is to bypass the administration, we have that now. I think this is a larger conversation to be had if we want to look at the 8-year. But just so we're all crystal clear, federal government may come back and say within that 8 years, real ID or enhanced IDs or both, or it'd be both, could change, so. We're kind of, it's not. We're not solving that equation of it, I guess, I'm just trying to be.
I want to, and I think I have to jump in at this point. I appreciate your preliminary and really high level review. But if the committee wants to go in this direction, which is what we'll, I guess, decide in the next few minutes, then we have to look at what would the testimony have to be in terms of what we would hear from the DMV, what would be the implementation, how would they go about that? There would be I couldn't be the only one that would make up the list of what we would have to do, but like we just did with any other amendment and or any piece of the law, we're going to have to then say, what is the impact? The Department of Finance piece that would, how they would handle it, how the funds would be handled. We're going to have to look at ask the agency how they would react. We're going to have to talk to AARP in terms of what information it has, 8-year renewal. We're going to have to take testimony of some level. I don't know what that level would be, but we're certainly going to have to give the DMV a chance to come in and testify. That would be at the very least versus a preliminary 2-minute answer. That doesn't mean that we can't do that. I just want to be clear. We're not going to put a piece in the law today without any testimony beyond what we've already heard. So that doesn't mean we can't focus all of our attention on that, but we're not and haven't at any point put it in. Perhaps our Senate colleagues do that, but that's a shot since I got to meet with them later today, but and I'll hear about it. But we can put put work into it, but we're not voting on it today. And we're got to decide that other than to say, we want to go in this direction, we want to hear more, we'll get more. We've heard presenters and whatnot and sponsors on all kinds of pieces. We had multiple witnesses on other amendments. That's, I guess, the real next question is that where we want to go? So, that's more the process piece goes. We will make that effort to go in that direction, but it's not going to be an up or down without additional testimony. And 2 minutes from the commissioner is not the level of testimony that we're going to just accept with, but we can go further if we want to. So.
Yeah, I'm all right. If we get to DMV, maybe AARP, I'm not sure, could ask them if they want to meet. I think maybe explore a little bit more about the process of like taking some of the funds and, pushing them aside. We had Chris Roop here talk about it. I think just sort of saying, well, what would be the process? What are the options? Doing nothing obviously is one, doing this and doing that. What are the options? And then, so I think, I'd like to hear that.
What is the impact? Certainly it's Ways and Means. It's going to want to see it. Chris Roop, the JFO testified it without the language. So they're going to obviously have to go back and look at the language. So I am not saying we can't be done. I'm just saying, like you had just pointed out earlier about process, we're going to have to make sure we do a process. Representative Burke.
I'm in favor of going ahead and do this. I think things that we can do to help people who are potentially help people who may be impacted by certain policies.
Yeah, thank you. I also support going forward with this too and getting more information.
So
Be the skunk of the party. I am not in favor, not that I don't appreciate more testimony, but I'm really not sure what more testimony in my mind would do. I just look at the fiscal reality of where we're in and the fluctuation this amendment could have on our transportation funds. All you have to do is look at the shortfalls for the next 4 years out, 40, 30, 25 million. We're not in the position to have excess funds to sort of ride this out. We're just not. If we sort of set aside our state dollars, we'll just tuck these in the corner. 23 years of experience, I don't think that's going to work too well because they're going to say notwithstanding and use it somewhere else. And another big thing is the reauthorization of the transportation bill. I don't, I would assume that's gonna get lower. We don't have Senator Leahy there. We were, you know, at the top eight, so state dollars are gonna become premium. Especially when we're trying to build out EV infrastructure and give more money to towns. So theoretically, yeah, we could tuck it away. I'm telling you, that's not, that money's just won't be there. And then you have a hard time matching up the state dollars to the federal dollars moving out. So I'll just leave it at that, but I mean, I'm ready to have a vote up or down one for the other. I'll leave it at that.
So if you're, are you asking for a vote?
We're not gonna vote, we're going to, but we're gonna hear comments, we're not gonna vote.
I'm with Tim. Yeah, I'm with Tim on this one.
And you two.
We didn't have a break. Have a discussion. We will have the floor. We have a piece this afternoon that's related to the conference committee. And 27 on the Medicaid portion of the trips and the additional public transit money. And we are trying to get additional testimony on trails for the conference committee, which we haven't even scheduled.
What about the rail leases?
I understand there's potential new language on that, which I haven't read yet, so that is also in a piece. And I appreciate everybody's flexibility that, as you can see, the agenda will continue to be a bit fluid over the next few days. We are back here after the floor, if the floor is workable. So